in Elon's world, there is no need to explain this change of heart, right? So he is now going back to a man who he told us all is, if not a pedophile himself, culpable for the rape and molestation of underage girls, right? And somehow that's fine now.
It is on.
Hi, everyone. Today I'm talking to the neuroscientist and host of the Making Sense podcast, Sam Harris, about Silicon Valley's shift towards authoritarianism in politics. I was really struck by how out there Sam was on this. He was very close to most of the tech moguls. We disagreed on a lot of things, including his thoughts on Islam. And we've had some sort of difficult conversations over the years. But I was really struck by, I would say, courage on his behalf, because he was saying things that no one else is, besides myself and some other journalists. And it came at a cost to him that was probably pretty high. And he sort of is very articulately expressing what a lot of people in tech feel and are too cowardly to say. So please listen up, because it was a very smart, possibly gloomy conversation. Sam, thanks for coming on.
Happy to be here. Great to see you, Kara.
Good to see you after a while. I don't remember the last time we talked. It was many years ago. But things have changed, as they say. And when it comes to Silicon Valley's shift towards authoritarian politics, the word we're hearing a lot these days is techno-fascism. I wanted you to talk a little bit about your journey, because at the beginning of you were like the toast of these people. Like, they loved talking to you and pointing you out to me and stuff like that. And much like Yuval Harari, that has changed, right? I think Yuval wrote a pretty critical book of where tech was going, and you yourself have changed in the way you think about it. Maybe that's not quite right, but I'd love to know how you define the word techno-fascism, and if you think it's the right word to describe this moment.
Yeah. Well, so to start with the personal, I don't think I've changed. My views are more or less exactly as they were, at least on the relevant topics that I think we're going to touch. Um, no, I just noticed a bunch of people change around me, and several of these key people were friends. So for me, I don't think this is so much the case for Yuval, but for me, it really is a story of finding friends with immense public platforms, doing a lot of harm, and finding it impossible not to comment on that harm, and really just spelling the end to the friendship. But I think there's a problem. I mean, I occasionally use the word fascist myself, but I think there's a problem in using the term. One is just so triggering for
Loaded.
anyone right of center who thinks that the analogy to what was happening in Weimar Germany
Hmm.
is just false on many levels, and on certain points it is false. So fascism is just a historically contingent movement, which is I mean, I think it's much easier to say something like authoritarianism, or tyranny, or
Hmm.
something more generic. So I think a lot of these guys have, for whatever reason, unmasked their inner authoritarian, and they're not so fond of real democratic institutions at the moment, and they're fond of oligarchy and kleptocracy and authoritarian puncture of most of what has kept our system as healthy as it's been for as long as we can remember. And I mean, certainly international alliances are unwinding as a result of this, et cetera.
You haven't changed. That is absolutely true. But one of the things, and I feel like I had a very similar purge, although I did see elements of it, right? They were irritated by the press. They often structure their companies in ways that they had full control, whether it's Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, but they always wanted complete control of their businesses, which I suppose I didn't mind, right? It made a
Right.
lot of sense back then, because a lot of people got run over if they didn't have by VCs or whatever, the stock market. And so I understood why they were that way. But what would be the word you use? Techno-authoritarianism, or is there a word, or should there have to be one?
Well, it sort of depends on which person and phenomenon we're talking about, because I think there are certain flavors of the unraveling here. I mean, well, on one level, I mean, if you're going to talk about somebody like Elon, so much of it is just trolling and a kind of you know solipsistic nihilism, right? I mean, he's just not out
Mhm.
of touch ethically with the harm he's causing. I think that's for me. That's the
Absolutely.
only way I can explain
Yeah,
his.
not new though,
y-
by the way.
What was that?
Not a new thing. Not new, because he used to sort of attack anyone who had any normal criticism for Teslas, for
Mm.
example, when it was just a product. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so I missed that. Like, I was, I was really just his friend. I really never saw him, in his mode as being a boss, and I didn't see, so for me, it's in speaking about specific people where the relationships are now no longer friendly. I don't know if it's a story of I didn't know who they were in the first place, or they changed, right? I mean,
Mhm,
so either accounts for the data at the moment. But just take Elon in his brief career as Doge master of the United
mhm,
States. Um, the person I knew seemed to have been incapable of behaving the way I saw this person behave. I mean, if you're the richest person on earth, tasked with making decisions that are suddenly going to harm some of the poorest people on earth, if you're cutting 20,000 workers in healthcare workers in Uganda overnight, and you're miserating hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who are relying on medical aid for tuberculosis or malaria treatment or HIV, and many of whom are kids under the age of 5, right? If you're doing all that work, you have all these other jobs, and you're the busiest man on earth. Are you going to spend your days and nights shit posting on X and celebrating your destruction of the greatest source of aid to the developing world, the USAID, as feeding it into the wood chipper, and calling all the
mhm,
people whose lives and careers you're upending over there as criminals? Um, I mean, he behaved like a total maniac, and
mhm,
then discovers that one of the engineers he's hired to do this onerous work is a committed racist, and rather than just fire that person,
mhm,
he does a poll on X to see whether he should fire him, and then discovers that 80% of his fans actually have a soft spot for racism, and then jumps out in front of a crowd and does what looks like a Nazi salute, not once but twice, and then when there's the predictable controversy in association with that, rather than apologize like a sane human being and prove that his heart is actually in the right place, he makes Nazi jokes on X and just trolls everyone who. I mean, and so there's this spirit of a kind of adolescent amorality. I mean, forget
mhm.
about immorality. I mean, I think some people are genuinely sinister and happily create harms, but many people are just detached from the ethical implications of what they do. And in a person like Elon, when what you do is literally affecting the lives of countries at
Mhm.
war, and the lives of millions, I mean, this is a monstrous evil for which he and his grifting friends are culpable. And so, and everyone who is maintaining cordial relationships with him and them in that orbit are in my view,
Culpable.
participating in this evil, right? I mean,
Correct.
it's just
Complicit.
there should have been. I mean, right of center. It is such a fever swamp of conspiracism and delusion.
Mhm,
Elon's reputation is well intact, but Bill Gates is thought of as a dangerous pedophile who was probably putting chips in us during
mhm.
within the COVID vaccines to somehow track us. Meanwhile, I mean, Gates. I don't know Bill. He could be an odd person. Leave that aside. There's no question he has helped, in his philanthropic work through the Gates Foundation. He and his former wife have saved more lives than anyone in living memory. Um, and it's the opposite of what Elon and his friends did in sub-Saharan Africa under Doge. And yet, right of center, up is down and down is up ethically. No one cares about those distinctions.
Right, absolutely, because it's so they're so removed from that. But let's talk about how we got here. Silicon Valley's always had a libertarian streak, or I call it libertarian light, but especially with founders and executives, and the core is the idolatry of innovators,
Mm.
really, and individual entrepreneurs who take risks and get rewarded. Um, let's talk about that shift, because in this new embrace of authoritarianism and right wing politics, is it so different from the past, or what are the roots of the new shift from your perspective? Because you've watched this, you've been closer to them than I have. I've covered them. I'm not their friends. I would call none of them friends. You've explained the shift towards authoritarianism as a backlash of left wing moral panic and or wokeness, and that's
Mm.
certainly present when they talk about it.
Yeah.
So draw a line for us as you see it.
Well, I do think the backlash against the far left is sincere. I mean, because I feel it myself, right? I mean, there's what happened on the left in democratic politics created a kind of super stimulus politically and ethically, whereas it just got so crazy or was perceived
Mhm.
to be so crazy by everyone. I mean, even people. I mean, I consider myself left of center. I don't even consider
Mhm.
myself in the center, but on every other relevant issue. But when you have someone like Kamala Harris running for president against the most odious opponent we've seen in living memory. I mean, somebody who has, done his best to shatter our society with lies and tried to steal an election, all the while claiming it was still being stolen against him, and engineered a something like an insurrection, if not attempted coup. Uh, the fact that we had a Democratic candidate, Kamala Harris, who couldn't disavow her former support for taxpayer-funded gender reassignment surgeries for incarcerated illegal immigrants at taxpayer expense, right? I mean, it's just I mean, that kind of thing is so crazy making. It's such a unnecessary own goal on the left. Yeah, of course, I think people with gender dysphoria should be have political equality, etc. But I mean, there was just something the capture of of democratic politics by the far left activist class, where everything was a series of blasphemy tests around identity politics, whether it was the trans issue or Black Lives Matter. Um, it was I do view so someone like Elon. I mean, when Elon said he's going to go to war against the woke mind virus, and he just confessed that he was totally radicalized by the experience of in his mind losing a son to the into a transgender cult. Um, I think that is actually sincere. I don't think there's an ulterior motive behind that. I think that was
Perhaps not.
yeah.
Perhaps not. But I mean, I think COVID had a bit to do with it. But Trump couldn't admit, for example, he lost the election. He couldn't disavow his racist supporters. But each of these tech leaders, I get that it's irritating. But how do you go from feeling frustrated about Me Too movement and the problems with that, the problems with DEI, which are very clear, and yet directionally a good idea, cancel culture, the Gaza campus protest, accusations of
Yeah.
racial bias, to supporting someone who tried to overturn a Democratic. It seems
Yeah.
a bit of a reaction.
Well, so what I can't explain is why someone in the center, as many of these people were,
Claim to be.
couldn't keep both grotesque objects in view simultaneously on the far left and on the
Mhm,
far right, and in
mhm.
Trumpistan, um, and and keep some sense of proportion, right? I mean, so I feel everything that Elon presumably felt about the far left, certainly virtually everything, and yet I always saw the danger of Trump and Trumpism as being far more grave to our, the functioning of our society, right? So I think you have to respond to both. But it is, I did notice this pendulum swing that, that everyone who was super sensitized to what was happening on the far left grew more and more acquiescent toward what seemed like the only viable corrective coming from Trump and Trumpism.
It also it was, talking about censorship and then they ban books. It gets the extra step, right? Talking about issues with trans people or possibilities of having a disagreement over sports, for example, and then going to banning them completely and removing rights. Like one does not equal the other in any
I mean,
way.
there's no making sense of the failures of coherence
Mhm,
among these new freshly minted fans of Trump and Trumpism. So I mean, if you pretended to care about what was on Hunter Biden's laptop because of all the corruption it might have indicated coming from the Biden family, how can you not care about what the Trump family is doing this very hour that outshines the worst of what could have possibly happened under Biden's watch by a factor of 1,000, right? I mean, it's just it's
mhm,
like just the Trump family's adventures in cryptocurrency alone, the
mhm,
meme coin. I mean, that should have. There's absolutely nothing ever alleged against Biden that holds a
mhm,
candle to that, and yet,
mhm,
you're not seeing the same people who were tearing their hair out over Hunter Biden's laptop and its suppression by
mhm.
the mainstream media or discussion of its suppression by the mainstream media. It's just these people are not coherent, right? They're
No,
tribal,
well, I
you know?
I I have an explanation. Let's have a hypothetical. Let's say the Biden administration and Democrats had championed all the same woke causes, like racial equality, a more open immigration policy, trans rights, but they cut taxes and took a hands-off approach to regulating tech. and crypto and AI. Do you think we'd still see that shift to the right? Because, yes, there are true believers, the MAGA cause, no question. But it's shocking to see someone like Sam Altman or Jensen Huang or Tim Cook embrace
Yeah.
what is based. And it seems like pure shareholder expediency to me. That's it.
Yeah, no, I think, once you draw the circle wide enough to include a visibly nervous Tim Cook delivering some crappy, solid gold Apple merch to the president, um, I think you're just talking about, uh, political expediency and, the thought that they have some fiduciary responsibility running a public company to do whatever it takes to raise their share price, in the presence of a very vindictive, very, kind of patronage pushing, president, and that's, I think that's, despicable. I mean, I think it's just an obvious failure of courage on all of their parts. I mean, if having many billions of dollars personally isn't sufficient to cause you to grow a spine, I don't know what it would take. So, every billionaire who bent the knee to this guy, I think, really has something to apologize for in the end. But I think it's explained in those cases is by not some newfound respect for Trump as some kind of business genius, but just recognizing that, okay, the country's being run by a personality cult. And at the center of that cult is a man whose whose oxygen really is flattery, right? And the only way to get anything done now for at least 3 plus more years is is to pay obeisance to the guy and make him feel like a genius in your presence because you're fawning all over him.
Right. Now, there's also a spiritual component, something you've written about issues around religion quite a bit, to this embrace of authoritarian politics. Elon Musk used to question the idea of God. Now he claims he's a cultural Christian. There's also Palantir founder Peter Thiel. He gave a series of lectures where he warned that critics of technology and AI were ushering in an arrival of the Antichrist and the destruction of the United States. What do you hear someone who has talked a lot and written a lot about religion, where the tech leads invoke religion and spirituality, especially as it relates to tech, like Thiel does? Now, Thiel was a long time religious. He had religious feelings, but rest of them not so much.
Yeah, well, so everyone is sort of working out their existential crisis in various ways. So, a lot of these guys have gone to Burning Man for years and done psychedelics for years, and the frame you put around all that conceptually is somewhat dependent on just the books you've read and the conversations you've had or haven't had, and the ideas you found persuasive. Um, the place where it touches politics in a way that is at least intelligible to me, and some of these concerns I share, as you know, is that I do think there is a zero sum contest between open societies generally. I mean, even beyond the West, but I mean to talk about it's usually framed as Western culture, but it's beyond that. Um, and Islamic fundamentalism the world over, So I mean, we really do have a tension there, which I've spent a lot of time, whinging about. And I think the last time we had a podcast, I whinged about that for the full hour. Uh, but um, and to some degree, various characters in this space can probably share that same hobby horse. They look at the fact that in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, can literally get a crowd of, several hundred thousand people out onto the streets of London, seemingly in support of Hamas, or effectively in support of Hamas, or at least not disposed to view Hamas as a terrorist organization, et cetera. And then that moral confusion spreads to the finest campuses in our own country, right? So we have Columbia, Harvard, et cetera. And then you have the presidents of three of those finest colleges brought before Congress, and they can't seem to figure out how to say that support for genocide is against their terms of service.
Mhm.
Um, and yes, there's a lot of fine print on all of those moments, and I'm happy to go down any of those rabbit holes if you want to. But the general picture here is one of people left of center being ruled by identity politics and white guilt, and a criticism of the West that runs so deep, sort of in the vein of Noam Chomsky, such that
Mhm.
America's blamed for everything. The West is blamed for everything. It's all colonialism and racism and slavery and awfulness.
Mhm.
and we have nothing to be proud of. And that that has there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot that makes sense of that. There's also many half truths and lies, weaving through all of that discourse. And at the end of the day, it's just not a healthy way to run our politics. So
Sure, but we talked about the excesses of the left, which were obvious, but that is certainly a rabbit hole. My point is to say tech regulation could usher in the antichrist and the destruction of a country. That is
yeah, no, I mean that
as
on its
extreme as
face
it
seems
gets.
crazy to me. But
Hmm.
what I'm just trying to do is draw some point of contact between statements of that kind that seem extreme and cultic and weird, and proto-fascist to some set of concerns that I consider rational, right? So Peter, if I were sitting across, I don't know Peter very well, but I think we would both agree that um, you know that Western Europe has a problem of assimilation with its Muslim community that we're happy to not have here in America, and we don't
Hmm.
want in America, right? In some sense, we would both agree with the project of let's not let America resemble Belgium with respect to this variable too
Sure, but
much.
how does it get to anyone who wants tech regulation as the antichrist?
Yeah, no, yeah,
That's
yeah,
a
yeah. I mean,
step
that's
way down. I don't even understand it. I think it's
well,
I think
well.
part of
I
me
think
thinks
I
it's
think so.
cynical.
I mean, if you imagine jumping from the critique of DEI, right? So what DEI was, in their view, is just a the nullification of anything like meritocracy. We're not going to care about getting the best man or woman for the job. We're just going to care about checking quotas because we're so guilty about our racist past. And so that from a kind of their kind of pure entrepreneurial frame looks like just a race toward mediocrity and failure. And they don't, so they don't want to be forced to do that.
Yes,
They
I
don't
get
want
it.
to,
I get it. It's the
and so that, yeah.
extreme nature, and also, by the way, it's a meritocracy, not a it often is friends of friends and friends of
Oh
Peter,
yeah,
and now
yeah, yeah.
it's friends
Yeah.
of Trump. Like they're doing
Well,
almost exactly because they've
of
gotten
course, yeah.
triggered by a obnoxious college student who's kind of allowed to do that on some level when they're younger, but and it's a sort of a bad faith definition of DEI because their excesses are different than wow, this seems funny that only white guys can win. Like, this seems unless they're better,
Well, I
right?
mean, what you
But
have in
one
the Trump administration
mhm,
is DEI for
white
conspiracists and
guys.
loons and grifters and sycophants, right? I mean, this is not.
Right.
If you care about
Exactly.
meritocracy, then you should care that we have the least qualified,
Right.
high level uh, uh, state servants we've ever had. I mean, it's just incredible. I mean,
Mhm.
there's a few exceptions there, but it's incredible to see who's making these decisions. We've got people who are used
Correct.
to doing condo deals, trying to figure out
Mhm.
the fate of nations.
Right, right, exactly. So that would be Mr. Witkoff. The venture capitalist Mark Andreessen did an interview with the New York Times back in January, explained his shift from Democratic voter to Trump supporter in 2024, although he wasn't very Democrat. I didn't even know his politics, I'll be honest with you. And one thing that comes through in the interview is his core belief that tech companies are run by good people doing good things that make the world a better place. Now, there's plenty of evidence not that way. So, the spread of election disinformation, deep fakes, loss of privacy, lack of safety, increasing polarization, loneliness epidemic. I've been speaking to parents who allege their children died from suicide by the encouragement of chatbots. Very compelling and depressing situation. So, the shift to MAGA, does it have to do with pure ego? I feel like I was a little too mean to Andreessen, and suddenly like he's the good guy, and he couldn't even imagine that some of these things are problematic. It seems like their feelings are hurt a lot by the general public seeing them as bad guys, and so they blame Democrats, who mostly were hand in glove with them for a very long time,
Mm.
by the way.
Well, there is an asymmetry here, which I've noticed. I mean, among people who are public figures to one or another degree, who got kind of crosswise with the left and got vilified by people whose politics they really shared across the board. I mean, people who support gay rights and gender equality and everything, just everything on the list, um, legalization of drugs, etc. But um, I mean, what you found is just the kind of the narcissism of the small difference on the left to a degree that no one had ever really experienced before, and you would just be defenestrated the moment you got slightly out of step with whatever. uh, shibboleth was then being uttered, and then they got simultaneously love bombed by everyone right of center. So you have um, I mean, it's not just MAGA, but it's just everyone right of center will accept your Pilgrim's Progress rightward without any
Mhm.
judgment. I mean, you're just like you're absolved of all your sins, and no matter how much you criticized these guys in the past, the moment you see the light about how awful wokeness is, they embrace you with open arms. And so, to some degree, I feel like we've witnessed this very weird sociological experiment where lots of people with fairly prominent platforms just got inducted into a kind of cult because their families were treating them terribly, and it just felt better, right of center, complaining about the left and how crazy it was.
Mhm. Mhm. And when you think about that, it's a lot of it's hurt feelings. It honestly feels like it in a lot of ways. And what was interesting about it, I mean, I'll make the argument that they may have gotten defenstrated, but there was a net right there. They didn't get that hurt. They got to come back. They're richer than ever. It's feelings. They had a lot of feels about whether people like them or not.
Well, I mean, the most interesting thing from my point of view is the total lack of moral sanity and integrity displayed by everyone involved here, because many of these guys were out of the closet hating Trump the first time around, and
Mhm.
for all the
Absolutely.
plausible reasons. I mean, even J.D. Vance said that
Mhm.
Trump is either an asshole of the first order or America's Hitler, right? And yet, no one ever has to give a rational accounting of how their views have changed. I mean, there were, after January 6th, some of the guys on the All In podcast, I think it was Chamath most vocally, in the aftermath of
This is
January 6th,
Chamath Palihapitiya
yeah, I
for
think he
those.
said that, Trump should be in jail for the rest of his life, right? I mean, it's like, so how these guys went from there to where they are now has never been explained, right? And they feel no burden to explain it because they have cultivated audiences that simply don't care about these kinds of, ethical
Now we're doing
incoherences.
this. Now we're doing this. And now, yeah,
Yeah.
it's really quite interesting. So let's move on to this shift towards authoritarianism in tech leaves everyday people. It's something you've written about a lot. In an interview with the Atlantic's David Frum, you said we are in a Tower of Babel moment. That informational guardrails are gone,
E
and in their
e
place is a
either
kind
way,
of
yeah.
quote new religion of anti-establishment conspiracy theorizing. Expand on that as a neuroscientist. Why do we struggle to sort through the glut of information online and distinguish the good from the bad?
Well, I think what we're finding, I mean, we sort of always knew this, but in the presence of the internet and social media, it's just become excruciatingly obvious, is that some percentage of us really have a taste for conspiracy thinking. And, so it's not that we just believe one of them.
It was not a new thing.
No, it's not new at
There's
all. I
been
mean, obviously it was with, JFK and before, but um, you find that it's just this kind of characterological trait that, you love one of these anti-establishment narratives and you seem to love all of them. And
Mhm.
like someone like Joe Rogan is one of the poster boys for this style of thinking, right? It's just the contrarian take on some world event is endlessly interesting, and it doesn't have to. And the kind of the search for anomalies in the standard interpretation is endlessly interesting. And what you get there, I mean, certainly when it gets weaponized on social media, is you get just the utter derangement of our politics. And it happens on both the left and the right, but it certainly happens more on the right. And traditionally, it's been more on the right. So you get, Candace Owens, who, within minutes of Charlie Kirk's assassination, was cooking up some alternate theory about what
Mhm.
happened there, and it has, she has an audience of millions who want to hear about this, right? And
Mhm.
and so I don't know how if you've ever followed how crazy she's gotten, but
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's she and Alex Jones are one upping each other into some sort of mystical state of confusion.
Mhm.
So everyone is captured by the algorithm, and it's a very perverse and weird algorithm as you go right of center, and it's one that's being consciously gamed by Russian bots and troll farms. I mean, it's just like we've built this digital infrastructure and invited our enemies to weaponize it against us, and we've monetized their efforts to drive us crazy in some kind of psyop.
But tell me, as I said, as a nurse, why does that work to distinguish the good from the bad, the inability? Is it the glut of information? Is it how it's delivered? What is different here? Because there was always a JFK, alligators in the toilet, whatever causes cancer.
There's a range. I mean, almost everything in us, admits of some kind of like normal distribution in terms. So a lot of people don't fall into this bin, but many of us are very uncomfortable without cognitive closure. I mean, just admitting that we don't know why something happened, or or we just have some probabilistic sense of, I feel like maybe it's a 50% chance it was this, and a 50% chance it was that, and I'm okay with that. There's desperation in many people to feel certainty on whatever point they're entertaining, and what conspiracy thinking offers you, I mean, it offers many things, but it offers this kind of race to cognitive closure, which is very entertaining. It's also very empowering for the disempowered. I mean, if you're somebody who doesn't feel like you're at the center of the action, or you're the world is the way you want it, um, it's very tempting to become part of a conversation that puts you,
Mhm.
this person on the fringe who no one's listening to, at the center of the truth, right? You have the true epistemology, right? And so it's a kind of, I mean, it's a kind of pornography of doubt, in my view, and a kind of religion that gets spun up around achieving cognitive closure based on not especially rational thinking.
So one of the most striking examples of that supports the idea that we're in a Tower of Babel moment is the ascension of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a longtime vaccine skeptic. I just spent the day at University of Pennsylvania, and they're all going to flee the United States. All these amazing scientists, in mRNA and other things. By the way, 20 years ago, the U.S. was on the verge of halting the spread of measles. Now, thanks to the spread of vaccine misinformation, outbreaks are getting worse. There's a big one happening right in the wake of Thanksgiving. Two children died of measles this year. I think there was zero for many, many years. And when the Biden administration pushed platforms to deal with COVID and election misinformation, they got accused of censoring conservative voices. So, what's the solution? Are we just going to continue to go into this pornography of information and being misinformed?
Yeah, well, barring some real consequence that gets one's attention, I think we are. I mean, some kind of economic or epidemiological or environmental catastrophe that is just unignorable. I mean, when you look at COVID was almost the worst case scenario, because it was bad enough so that our kind of our seemingly rational response to it at every stage along the way was seriously disrupting of society. Um, but it wasn't so bad that you couldn't have a wide diversity of opinion about what was rational to do, and you
Hmm.
have a lot of people who could just say, "Well, this is just a cold, and
Hmm.
I don't care about it." And
Hmm.
that was, while that wasn't strictly rational, lots of people got away with living that way, and they can now say, "See, this was all much ado about nothing." And you had a lot of liberals trying to in their own authoritarian way, trying to control my life, and I'm going to have none of it. And so I feel like we probably learned many of the wrong lessons from COVID.
COVID, it wasn't killer enough. It didn't kill us enough.
Yeah, you could imagine, and it killed old people preferentially, and not kids preferentially. And so, I mean, next time around, we might be in the presence of a virus that is killing kids, right? And that
Right.
will
There
provoke
have
a,
been
a very
those.
different response, I think, or one would
Yeah.
imagine.
Well, that's what measles are, by the way. What would you say? It's just not widespread. It's just a small group of people. But what about January 6th? Why wasn't that enough? It was one of the most witnessed live events, live stream on TV. It
Yeah,
was appalling to
yeah.
watch.
But you could, I
Didn't
mean, then
work.
you're Tucker Carlson, and you can show the weird footage of cops just, obviously scared cops just letting in a mob because they knew they were not in a position to resist the mob. And so it looked like just kind of the friendly opening the door to, and some kind of collaboration with the crowd. And so what
Mhm.
was this, a false flag operation? And then you get this discourse of this counter narrative,
Right.
which is obviously
Right.
crazy. So, but again, what is so corrosive here is that now we have a culture, or at least parts of culture, that doesn't care about hypocrisy and lies on any level, right? So Tucker suffered no rebuke from his own audience when it was revealed that for years he had been pretending to like Donald Trump,
Mhm.
and yet behind closed doors he was texting that he thought Trump was a demonic force and he couldn't wait to be rid of him.
Yeah, same thing with Dan Bongino just recently. I was paid to make these things up.
Right. So I mean, I just, I mean, perhaps you feel the same way. I cannot imagine having an audience that would stay with me should it be revealed that I was that duplicitous, right? I mean, like
Mhm.
just perpetrating a fraud on them for years, just pretending to think
Mhm.
one thing and thinking the other thing.
Gosh, you don't have a mother who loves Fox News then.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah. So,
it wor it
but so
it
that's the
works. It's
cultural problem.
cognitively it
Yeah. I mean,
works.
that's
Yeah.
a culture that doesn't care about the truth, even and doesn't care about being lied to, even by the people they are putting their trust in. I mean, like I mean, in Trump, we have somebody who lies with a velocity that we have never witnessed in public life, and yet his fans. It's not like his fans don't think he lies; they know he lies. They just simply don't care about that.
Don't care.
Yeah.
Right, right. And speaking of which, it's the reason dictators like Russia's Vladimir Putin love the idea of politicizing truth. No one knows what to believe, so people often end up going along with the narrative pushed by those in power. In this case, the power to influence opinion is concentrated in the hand of a few billionaires outside the government in tech. And in this case, people like Musk, they're mainstreaming fringe ideas like the great replacement theory and vaccine skepticism or whatever. I just spoke to journalist Jacob Silverman, who wrote the book about Silicon Valley's radicalization called Gilded Rage. He said, get it? He said it's disturbing that we're still not really having a conversation about the lack of accountability that these leaders, these tech leaders, face for their behavior. But that said, the polls are showing that the public, the wider public, is deeply distrustful of these people, both on the left and the right. So, is that conversation gaining traction from your perspective? It
Hmm.
feels like it,
Well, I
but
feel like
perhaps not.
I mean AI. If anything like the dreams of AI are realized, I mean,
Mhm,
leaving aside the existential
mhm,
concerns around the misalignment of AI with our well-being, but just
mhm,
if AI succeeds, and you know basically cancels the need for most human labor, um,
mhm.
we're going to have a reckoning with wealth inequality that we just simply can't avoid any longer, right? I mean, so
Right.
so it's been coming for as long as we've been alive, really. But it's AI, I think, is going to force the issue in a way that will be undeniable. So
Yes,
how?
which people feel in their bones,
Yeah,
right? You can feel people feel it, even
yeah,
if it
and
is
also, I mean, just
overwrought.
if jobs, especially white collar, higher cognition, higher status jobs, evaporate preferentially in the face of this tech. Um, I just think, yeah, there'll be, the pitchforks are coming, whether they're carried by people who were, used to be plumbers or people who used to be software developers. I just think in success, we're going to have to figure out how to have a far more equitable society than we have.
Mhm. Yeah, I've always told them that. I'm like, you're just pushing off the day where you have to armor plate everything. So we'll get to regulation and that with solutions and things. I want to end with that. But every episode we get a question from an outside expert. Here's yours.
Hi, Sam. I'm Kim Scott. I'm the author of the book Radical Candor. From where I sit in here in Silicon Valley, it seems like affluence and courage have become negatively correlated here. The wealthy believe they have too much to lose if they speak out. What is so alarming to me now isn't that an authoritarian president and a small cadre of right wing tech execs want to take over. What is truly surprising to me is that the same people who once believed in the power of technology to strengthen our society and our democracy have gone ominously quiet. Fear is a tyrant's best weapon. The people in Silicon Valley who have made fortunes still have a platform and a voice. Now is the time to use them and to stand together in solidarity. Our silence will not protect us. Why do you think more people are not speaking out? And how should we be speaking out?
That's a great question because I think I
Yeah.
get a lot of girls from people and then they say
Hmm.
nothing, and I'm sure you do too because there's
Hmm.
a cost for what you're doing.
We're watching the ruination of so much that we care about. right? I mean, if you look at the stature of our country on the world stage, right, and what our country represents to our, allies and former allies, and for to countries that aspire can only aspire to be democracies, right? I mean, we used to stand for quite a lot I mean, it's not that we don't have things to apologize for. We have a checkered past. I mean, it's been 250 years, but on our best days, we really, could be credibly be said to care about, whether you, killed or jailed your journalists or rigged your elections or imprisoned your political dissidents, right? And now, as a country, we seem to be only care about whether you give our president and his rapacious family a hotel deal in your capital
Hmm.
city, right? I mean, or you whether you buy whether you enrich them directly by buying millions of dollars worth of or billions of dollars worth of their cryptocurrency, right? I mean, that's we're it's an extortion racket that we're running on the world
So
stage at the
why aren't
moment.
people saying things? I mean, both of us are smaller than all those people from a financial point of view. And I have an independent company. You have your own independent. We've sort of carved out these podcast little islands or whatever that seem immune at this point. But why haven't others spoken up? What is your sense? They're terrified. They call me. I get a lot of girl. Good job. Good for you. I was like, yeah, and you please step up.
I mean, it's often a story of incentives. I mean, so I think there is something perverse around the incentives of running a public company and imagining that your fiduciary duty to shareholders is the kind of a master value, right, that covers every other conceivable sin, right? So you can literally, shake hands with the next Hitler because that is what the market, your future in the market will require. Um, I'm not saying Trump is Hitler, but I mean you get my point. It's I think there's a I mean, that's just a failure mode of capitalism that we have to correct for. And every one of these guys who we know thinks Trump is an imposter, really. I mean, even as a businessman, an imposter, right? None of these guys think Trump was even a major real estate developer,
No,
when he was a real
moron
estate
is
when he,
what I
what,
hear from a lot of them. What a moron.
yeah. So they're pretending to lionize him, and again, if I mean, some of these guys have $100 billion or more,
Mhm.
right? And or I mean, 10 billion should be enough to inoculate you against these fears
1.
of being personally ruined by
Mhm.
pissing off the president of the United States in our country, right? I mean, so this is what we needed. We needed someone like Jeff Bezos or Mark Benioff or any of these
Ugh,
guys
that guy.
to say, listen, this is America. I'm not bending the knee to this maniac.
Mhm.
I run a very important public company. If he seeks to damage it, everyone in the press is going to notice that,
Mhm.
and we're going to talk about it, and we're
Mhm.
going to ruin the political party that put him in power
Right.
because this is not the kind of country we live in,
Right.
right?
Right.
And um, where was that guy or gal who's running a public company who's inured against personal harm because this is still America and they're as wealthy as they could ever need to be. I mean, it's crazy making that we
Yep.
don't have dozens of examples of that.
I would agree. So let's get to some solutions to finish up. Right now, some of the biggest proponents of the government around AI are coming from within MAGA. Interesting. Last week, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis unveiled a Citizens Bill of Rights for AI. Steve Bannon has said AI is likely the most dangerous technology in the history of mankind. Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene has also expressed fears about the expansion of AI with no guardrails. I don't agree with them on most things, and they always end up showing their actual ingredients very quickly. But um, is that a growing civil war within the populists and tech CEOs? Do you see that playing out, and you imagine a scenario where populists actually win and regulate the tech companies?
Yeah, well, I can imagine if it became, politically dominant, then it would be dominant. I mean, I don't know what the limit of influence is from the oligarchs at this moment. I mean, they don't get everything they want because in some sense they're not aligned. I mean, like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk can't get precisely what they want if they're competing in the race to space, right? Someone is going to get Trump's favor or not, right?
Mhm.
So,
Same thing with
you
these
know, they're not
media mergers, yeah.
they're not, yeah, exactly, the media merger with Netflix now. I mean, so it's not everyone's not aligned, but yeah, I can imagine that it will take something like a minor catastrophe to get everyone's attention. You know,
Mhm,
if we do something with AI that is sufficiently destabilizing to our economy,
mhm.
right? You know, if someone unleashes something that makes the Nasdaq go dark for a week, right? And no one can figure out how much money they have. Um, I just think that's something has to wake us up, right?
Yeah, I was just called a non-patriot by one of them, and I was like, "Oh, but you're selling chips to China? Okay, got it." Like, I'm not sure what to say. The Trump administration is sticking by these tech oligarchs, so with the help of AI czar David Sachs, I'm not a fan. Trump has promised to sign an executive order soon to bar states from passing their own AI regulations, something the tech elites really want, but a lot of people really don't. The do whatever you want approach to the tech sector is what got us here in the first place, as you just noted. Tech.
So I mean, like on a point like that, I would just say that there is a version of that that makes sense to me. I mean, I don't think we want
Mhm.
50 different sets of
I agree.
regulations around
I
this kind of
completely agree.
technology. But what it really demands is a sane set of regulations coming from the federal
Which
government.
hasn't ever happened, you know? By the way, the tech leaders hated the Biden administration's push to regulate them. Andreessen called Biden's efforts to regulate crypto a, quote, "a terror campaign." Little much, Mark. But what would that entail? Because I write the annual story. Once again, we don't have tech regulation of any sort, even the most minor. The previous administration didn't get it right. This administration is letting all hell break loose. A federal system would obviously be best in AI, for example, but it doesn't happen because of the power of the
Yeah.
people holding the purse strings.
Well, it also doesn't happen because of the perceived race that is existential against China in particular. Um, and I mean, I think there's some, again, it might take some terrible outcome that is, that doesn't kill us all to get us to collaborate with our enemies on this particular point and regulate in a way that's sane. I mean,
What would be
no
that
one.
sound policy, would you say, for example, the first one?
I mean, there are really two levels of the problem. There's the malicious use of this technology by bad actors, um, and perhaps the inadvertent bad outcomes of just the way people can use it. But there's the deeper problem that many people worry about, which is just the existential risk posed by the so-called unaligned AI, right? That we could build
Mhm,
something that is super intelligent and
mhm,
becomes actually self-improving, and that this technology can fundamentally get away from us, right?
mhm.
And what's truly alarming is that all the people, at least in the States, who are building this tech, I mean, people like Sam Altman, it's not like they think that those existential concerns are irrational. No, in fact, when you ask them, they put the probability of existential collapse at something like 20%. They're not saying it's 1 in a billion, so don't worry about it. They're saying no, no, this is a completely sane set of concerns. I am not quite sure how we're going to avoid it. We hope as we walk these final yards into the end zone, we'll figure it out. But none of them think that. I mean, they all acknowledge that we're playing a game of Russian roulette, that they're playing a game of Russian roulette, and that there's at least one bullet in the cylinder, and we're just um, we're pulling the trigger because we have to, right? We economically
I
have to.
called
We're in
I
a race
called it
against China,
I called it the "Xi or me" argument with Mark Zuckerberg when I was interviewing him, and I
right?
was like, "I don't like
Yeah.
you either." Does it require some kind of true populist revolt that's centered on class-based politics, which Scott talks about, even if it has an anti-capitalist undercurrent in many ways? Although I would argue this Trump administration is socialist at this point, given all the things they're doing. What's needed for American democracy to thrive, if not populism? How do you envision citizens wresting power back from
Mm.
authoritarians and tech oligarchs?
Well, I don't know. I haven't ruled out the possibility that cultural change could surprise us and be sweeping. I mean, for instance, I think that as AI, as the AI slopification of everything continues, we might get to a point where many people, maybe even most people, declare some kind of epistemological bankruptcy with respect to the internet or with respect to social media. I mean, it's like if you're looking at a video and your first thought is now always, "Is this even real?" Right, and that just gets locked in, right? It's just like, okay, this looks like Vladimir Putin declaring World War III, but who knows if it's even real, right? Strangely, this could force a new return to sort of traditional gatekeeping, right? But we might wake up in a world where all of a sudden you don't believe the video of Putin unless you see it coming from the New York Times or Getty Images or like some official, gatekeeper, and this could make social media far less captivating for people.
Yeah,
I mean, one could hope that would happen
there was
because
an idea
it's
to
so
mark the real stuff, not
right,
demark,
yeah.
not mark the fake stuff, which is kind of interesting to
But
think
yeah, but I
about.
mean, now there's kind of an arms race between, detecting fakes and producing fakes,
Mhm,
and maybe there's an asymmetry there where it's always gonna be easier to produce them than to detect them. I
mhm,
don't know, but, um, I just think, I mean, to some degree, we all have to sort of kind of personally work this out with respect to social media. I mean, as you
mhm.
know, I deleted my Twitter account
Yes,
3
me
years ago.
I didn't
You know,
delete it
I'm
because I
I
thought he'd do something shitty with my account. I just
mm.
left it there.
Yeah. So I mean, it's always humbling to confess that that's like the greatest life hack I've found in the last
Mhm.
decade or more. I mean, it was
Same thing
just
with Scott.
just in
Me
terms of
too.
improving my life,
Me
it's
too.
just absolutely enormous. And I think it's possible that many more people will have a similar epiphany because there is something toxic about our engagement with these tools. I mean, leaving AI aside and its capture of our economy, just having our lives fragmented in this way by this, this digital bride, I mean, we're just, so much of your sense of what the world is and what you are in the world has been uploaded into this space, which, I mean, honestly, I mean, again, there are exceptions here, but I mean, it's easy to it's easy to say Twitter isn't real life if you're me because I've taken steps to immunize myself against the
Mhm,
pain of it all, but it really isn't real life if you're me. I mean, it's like it is so amazing how much it doesn't matter
mhm.
what happens
I
on
agree. I never looked
X.
back. It was astonishing.
Even if it's Elon Musk attacking you by name and you're
He
trending
likes to do that.
that day,
Yeah, he
yeah,
does.
it really doesn't matter. And so,
Yeah.
um, many people may begin to yearn for a life in the real world, reading real books and having real conversations face to face, and that
Mhm.
might be a kind of spiritual awakening for our whole culture. I mean, we
Right.
might use these tools differently. And
You do see younger people. Both my older sons just don't. What? What are you talking about? You know, don't care. They use YouTube to watch TV. That's how I would put it. I don't think they use it to be influenced. I think they just like TV, and that's their version of television. And which I watched quite a bit. So this has been a relatively gloomy conversation, but really interesting. But you say you're hopeful. We're in a quote emperor's new clothes situation where the truth is obvious, but just going unacknowledged by most people. So, what needs to happen to start for the kid to point to the emperor and say, "Ah, you're naked"?
yeah, well, the kid is certainly pointing. I mean, he's always pointing, but I again, I think it may take. I don't. I mean, maybe as simple as just it no longer being Trump at the center of Trumpism, right? I mean, like when you ask yourself, can JD Vance
Yeah,
or
do
any
I want to look
other
at that guy? No.
plausible candidate, inherit the mantle
Mhm.
of the cult? And it certainly seems plausible that the answer to that is no. That's just for a variety of reasons. The kayfabe of the professional wrestling vibe is not going to be sustainable. Um, and we might suddenly be confronted by a whole culture right of center that pretends never to have been as morally confused as they now are. Right, lots of people will come shuffling back into normalcy pretending that they never got caught up in the denialism and the cultishness and the weirdness that is Trumpism. That's totally possible. They'll now suddenly care about, you know, uh, for alliances with our democratic partners in Europe, and they're no longer fans of Putin, and they don't remember that anyone ever was a fan of Putin in
Mhm.
the Republican Party. Um, I mean, it's
Oh, I
all
see
that's
that.
possible, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know what happened. What did I drink
Yeah.
last night?
What?
Yeah.
No, no, I didn't. I wasn't at that conference, and no,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah.
uh,
And what are you gonna say to them? I mean, oddly enough, Rachel Maddow said the same thing. We're gonna have to let them,
mm,
this is their last chance, and they need to start to shift or
yeah,
this is
yeah.
they have
I
an
mean, I don't know that
opportunity.
we might need something like a Truth and Reconciliation Commission at some level. I mean, for someone again, for someone like Elon, who's acted like such a maniac, um, there, I don't know how you get back uh, into normalcy without some kind of mea culpa. I mean, it's like, what were you thinking during Doge, right? When you were little, I mean, like, and what were you thinking when you were bringing back neo Nazis and conspiracists with great fanfare onto X at a moment when we were watching a global eruption of anti Semitism, the likes of which we hadn't seen since the Holocaust, and just um, and meanwhile, all in the name of free speech absolutism, but also then just kicking off journalists who you didn't happen to like and complying with the demands of authoritarians the world over, suppressing the speech of political dissidents in countries like Turkey, right? I mean, just like who the hell did you become, and how can you pretend to now be normal?
Look, that's that you're asking for a Scrooge moment. He wakes up
Yeah,
Christmas morning and says,
oh yeah,
"Boy,
yeah.
buy me the turkey. Let's do
There will have
things."
to be many Scrooge moments.
Right,
Yeah.
but what would you say if he called you and said, "I am so sorry. I can't believe I attacked you." And he does attack you. He attacks me much less than you. I don't even
Mm.
wouldn't even know if he's been attacking me, honestly. But I was the face of evil, I think. Um,
Yeah,
what would you
but are you
say?
pure evil? The last thing he said about me
Oh,
on
it's
Twitter
pure
was that I
evil.
am
That's
pure
his
evil. Yeah,
favorite.
so
I
so
believe
I
I have
have
a
that over you, I think.
heart of evil. I don't remember.
Yeah,
Whatever.
yes. You have a heart filled with hate
Hate,
if
heart filled with
memory
hate.
serves.
That's
Yeah,
right. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, yeah.
What would you say? He called you and said, "Okay, I'm really sorry. I'm going to do whatever it takes to have
Well,
reconciliation and truth."
I mean, that's an interesting question about, essentially the physics of apology, right? Like what constitutes an acceptable apology? And for me, it requires that the person sketch some rational path from where they were to where they say they now are, right? So it's like, how is it that you were, yeah, like how is it that you think better of the things you did, and how are you now the person who views those things the way I view them? So I'm willing to. I mean, apology and forgiveness. I mean, this is some of the best. This is the best software we've got, right? I mean, like the capacity to forgive someone. I mean, this is absolutely indispensable, not just psychologically, but civilizationally. And um, we celebrate people being having changes of heart and being
Mhm.
forgiven at the deepest level. I
That's why I
mean,
mentioned
there,
Scrooge in this Christmas season. It's
or
the
like, but
enduring
even just like
tale.
a rapist or a
Mhm.
murderer. I mean,
Mhm.
someone literally, you can get someone coming out of prison who really did commit the murders for which they were sent to prison, and now whether in a Christian context or
Has
just
found
a
grace.
secular
Yeah.
context, we acknowledge that people can apologize and be different people, but there has to be some intelligible path from there to here, and in the absence of that, it just seems like it just seems like a bad faith maneuver, and so
Right.
I have no idea how I would respond unless I was in the situation,
Yeah. I probably wouldn't let him back. Sorry.
but it's not going to happen.
I'm
I mean,
good for
that's just
I know it's
yeah,
not gonna
yeah, yeah.
happen. He'll no,
I'm
I'm a
certainly not
I'm
waiting for it.
certain people banish it, I say. Banish it without an E. Banish it. You are banished. I don't think that's the worst thing society's ever done for certain people, but we'll see.
Life is too short,
That
Kara.
I understand that, but it's not that short, let me just say.
Yeah, yeah,
Anyway,
yeah,
I
yeah.
really
It's just
appreciate it.
long enough for it to matter, but yeah,
Just long
right,
enough.
yeah,
Anyway, I really appreciated Sam. What an interesting and we can whinge about things we disagree with later, but this was
yeah.
really
Well,
smart, and I appreciate your thoughts on
always
it.
happy to do it.
All right, thank you. Today's show was produced by Christian Castro-Russell, Michelle Alloy, Megan Burney, and Kaylin Lynch. Nishat Kurwa is Vox Media's executive producer of podcasts. Special thanks to Bradley Sylvester. Our theme music is by Trackademics. If you're already following following this show, you know the emperor has no clothes, and yuck when I think about it. If not, you're drowning in conspiracy porn. We'll be back on Thursday with more.